Hi, welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack, where the Jazz have completed a two-game road trip to the state of New York. They took down the Nets in game one, didn't quite go so well in game two against the Knicks, but that second road win of the year is a big deal. Let's take a look at some Isaiah Collier assists to both Walt and Ace in this latest Knicks game.
Stretch that he was out, Clyde. Knicks 6-3. One of the games, Jaylen Brown had 42. As Clayton knocks down a three. The other one, Wagner had 37. As he flips it up and in. Collier. And Clayton off the bench. Knocks down his third three-pointer. They got a nice sound, Clyde.
They did.
Bailey inside and throws it down. Impressive slide.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So there we saw 3 assists by Isaiah in the game Jazz versus Knicks. And Isaiah is playing much more under control, and Walt is shooting the ball a lot better the past few games. And we also saw Ace's obvious athletic talents on the fast break dunk with the assist from Isaiah. So those 3 guys continue to grow in terms of how they are playing. And we see that game to game. We talk about this all the time. And we continue to see the growth and the positive play from those 3 guys. Tonight's game was a little bit difficult because the Knicks got out to such a massive lead in that first quarter that, especially with Isaiah and Walt, they kind of got into the game where the game was so out of reach already. I mean, Walt never really did play in any sort of time in the game where it was competitive. So Walt's time tonight was kind of all, where the Jazz were so far behind, and much of his time came in that fourth quarter where the game was completely out of reach. And Isaiah too. Isaiah racked up 7 assists tonight in the game against the Knicks, but they were 7 assists that came in where the Knicks starters certainly were not playing at that point. So it was an interesting road trip because that first game against the Nets, Jazz played so well, and they did get down, but then they came back and they took a lead and they won that game handily. And that was by far the best road win because they did win in Boston. And Boston Celtics shot 11 for 51 from 3 that night, but the Jazz did win. But this game they won easily against Brooklyn. And that's even more impressive. So I think that this was, overall, I'd say this is a successful road trip for the Jazz. Good experience for the guys. The second half of that back-to-back game against the Knicks didn't go particularly well tonight, but the first game against the Brooklyn Nets, getting a win, getting the second win of the season on the road, I think that is a positive for the team moving forward.
Yeah, the highlight I wanted to also just talk about in your highlights is that you mentioned Walt, smooth shooting stroke, quick release, looked really good. When he shoots the ball, even if he misses it, it looks just really good. He's going to be a knockdown shooter eventually in the NBA. We can all see that. Ace has an incredible athletic ability that he's able to go over people, through people, and still dunk the ball. Even though, honestly, his measurable is 6'7.5", right? He's not that large of a guy. He just has long arms and great athletic ability. And then the one that I wanted to highlight that you didn't highlight is one of those fast breaks started because Flip got a rebound over the top of somebody, did a great outlet pass to Isaiah down the court, and then Isaiah flipped it back to Ace coming down and dunked the basketball. So young guys all working together, all working hard, all doing better. It's great to see. The Knick game was, let's face it, it was a tough watch because they played so poorly in the first quarter. They were just out of it. And I can't really explain why exactly that happened, but that was a tough game tonight. But I agree with you. If you come out of an East Coast road trip of 2 games in New York, even if one of the teams is down and you win one of those games and you win one of those games handily, we'd be happy with that road trip. And I think we can fly home feeling really good about what happened.
One of the things that, I watched the Knicks feed, and it's Mike Breen and Walt Frazier. And that first quarter, the Knicks scored a boatload of points. And at that first quarter deficit the Jazz face, that's the biggest spread in any first quarter since they started taking statistics in 1996 for the Knicks. That's what they said. That was the biggest spread. So that's a big thing. And they also said that the 146 points that they scored tonight, that was the most points the New York Knicks have scored since 1980. Since 1980. This is the highest scoring game they've had. So that's a like we've previously said, there are some remarkable statistics that we've seen this year. Those two stats are one of those, or a couple of those, and we're going to see more. This isn't going to be the end of it, but it's interesting to watch the opposing announcers and what they say and how they read how the game is going and stuff, because this is one of those nights. And it's not like Walt Frazier and Mike Breen. I think those are two pretty good announcers, and that's a good broadcasting duo. And there were certain things they were complimentary to the Jazz about. And certainly the Jazz are on a back-to-back. It's a really long road trip to only play 2 games, in the state of New York, and then having to fly all the way back to Utah. That's obviously not an ideal road trip. When you go all the way to the East Coast and only play 2 games, not great, difficult times. So the back-to-back on it, the Jazz were in a tough spot. Certainly a tough spot. But it's interesting. I mean, we know how much the Jazz are struggling defensively, and we're going to look at some defensive ratings among individual Utah Jazz players during this podcast to see how each of the individuals rank among all the NBA players in terms of defensive rating, offensive rating, and effective field goal percentage. But the Jazz are still struggling defensively. Will Hardy's still trying to figure that out. We've talked this since game 1 of the preseason, that Will Hardy is trying to figure out a way to have the guys play better defense. So far, he still hasn't found it. The Jazz, in terms of overall defensive rating, they're still the bottom of the league, and they're still trying to climb out of that. So it's still a work in progress. But at the end of the season, what we want is we just want to see improvement, meaningful improvement. So we're only like 20 games in. So let's see what happens over the next 60.
And the one thing I was going to say is that Keontae George is now getting assignments from great defensive players on the other team. Bridges came out and guarded Keontae today and played him really tough. And I think one of the reasons why they struggled in the first quarter is they really took away what the Jazz do to score, and that's Markkanen and Keontae. But if I look at Keontae's box score tonight, he shot respectably. He shot okay. He had decent assists, et cetera. Well, 4 assists, so not a ton of assists. But he's now, he's now a focus of opposing teams, and he's playing respectable in doing that. So I got to give him credit for it. I mean, it was a tough night. Both he and Markkanen are a negative 33, so it's nothing to write home about. But you also are going against a Knicks team that the price they paid for Bridges to bring in his defensive ability, the price they paid, not so much the price they paid for Anunoby, but they did play a price for Anunoby as well. They brought in these guys to be able to shut down other teams, and I think that Keontae played respectable for that. So I give him credit. I mean, he's certainly improved in that regard. And one just comment on the Knicks. I listened to a little bit of the announcers as well of the Knicks team, and they said they now have their best record to start the season, or tied for their best record at home to start the season. They're 15-7 on the year. They're 12-1 at home. So it's very interesting is that if you think about that, that means on the road, they've lost almost every game, and they've had twice as many home games almost as they have road games. So they're going to be hitting the road. It'll be really interesting to see what happens to the Knicks, because at home, it seems like they're lights out. On the road, they struggle. So let's see if they turn that around in the next couple of weeks, because I assume they will be hitting the road.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that the coaching change isn't necessarily beneficial to them on the road. I'm not surprised that they're better at home, but I'm also not surprised that they're struggling on the road with the coaching change. Thibodeau is a completely defensive-minded coach. It helps on the road immensely if you can defend, and that's where I haven't looked at the statistics for the Knicks in terms of where they are defensively this year compared to last, but I probably will do that at some point to see what how the coaching has impacted the. But overall, in the NBA this year, like I think Walt Frazier said it tonight, like nobody's defending in the NBA. Well, you have OKC and then a bunch of really bad defense because the scores, and a lot of it's the way that's being officiated and all of that. So there's a lot that goes into it. But defensively, the league is really struggling this year defensively. And quite frankly, it'd be a lot more enjoyable to watch if the defense were better than just running up and down, just jacking shots randomly and all these just massive scores of 140 points. It'd be certainly be better if we could get kind of the scoring and the free throws a little bit more under control than what we've seen in the early season so far.
And before you go off of that point, I haven't looked at it in a week, but a week ago, I pulled these statistics that I told you about. I mentioned briefly on the podcast, is that if you look at the NBA scores, the average score the last 10 years, this year is more than it's been any of the years of the last 10 years. Now, about 10 years ago, it was more when they're calling a lot of fouls. And it's about 4 points, at least, a week ago, about 4 points a game higher because there's 4 free throws more per hire. So I think that I agree with you. I think the defense has gone down this year, and we should look at those statistics overall to see how the league defensive rating has gone versus last year. But they're calling them more fouls. And both you and I are of the view that, look, there's a foul on every play, multiple fouls on every play. You could always put people on the free throw line. It's a better game overall if you're more selective in the fouls that you go. And I think the foul shooting this year is kind of out of control. And I think it's working the league. So I do hope that's some adjustment they make mid-year to say, look, we're calling too many fouls, because it's just not the net game was an example. Like it was just crazy the number of free throw shot in that game. But anyhow, that's all I have to say on that.
Let's look at what I'm going to do here is, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at where the Jazz players currently rank among all NBA players in terms of effective field goal percentage, offensive rating, and defensive rating. Now, with effective field goal percentage, 3-point shots are factored into this. So, 3-point shots are worth 50% more than 2-point shots, as you would guess, because a 3 points is 50% more than 2 points. So that's how they get to effective field goal percentage. So we're going to look at where each of the Jazz players rank among all the NBA players, and this is filtered to filter out some players. So to be in the running, to be in this list, there's 328 NBA players in this list, and the criteria I used to filter this is you had to play at least 10 games, and you have to play, in those 10 games you played, you have to average at least 10 minutes. So that's how I whittled it down to 328 players. So let's take a look at that and see where each of the Jazz players rank. So the top Jazz player in effective field goal percentage, his NBA rank is 47, and that's Fee at 61.6. Number 2 on the Jazz list ranks 106, and that's Kevin Love at 57%. Number 3, 139, and that's Lowry, 55.2. Next is Ace at 169 at 54.2. Next is Collier at 197 at 53.1. Next is Kyle at 213 at 52.5. Next is Keontae at 233 at 51.2. Next is Bryce at 237 at 51. Next is Nurk at 276 at 48.3. Next is Walt, 284 at 47%. Next is Taylor, 316 at 41.5. And Cody is dead last out of all the players that are filtered. There's 328 players. Cody ranks dead last, 328 at 33% effective field goal percentage. So that's where the Jazz rank. So you have the highest is Svi at rank number 47, which isn't particularly good. I mean, the Jazz are actually, in terms of the points scored, we've looked at the difference between where the Jazz score in the past podcast. We've looked at how many points they score at home compared to how many points they score on the road. At home, they score 22 more points per game. At least when I looked at this a few games ago, they score 22 more points per game at home than they do on the road. So there's a massive disparity here, between how the Jazz play at home versus road. And that certainly impacts these numbers. The Jazz are shooting the ball a lot better at home, and these effective field goal percentage, are largely reflective of how poorly the Jazz are playing on the road to this point. As you can see, the Jazz, they won their second game on the road in Brooklyn, and now they've just struggled thus far on the road. So that's where you kind of get these effective field goal percentage numbers and why the rankings are not in the Jazz's favor right now, even though the Jazz are scoring in terms of points scored per game, where they rank in overall in the NBA right now is actually pretty good.
Let me ask you a question. So you went through all these numbers. Which of these players strikes you as something you didn't expect? Like in looking at these, which are alarming signs and which are things like, that's interesting for this player?
Well, quite frankly, I'm somewhat surprised about Svi and Love being the two best on the Jazz. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that Ace is fourth. I'm not surprised that Lowry's around 140. Now, is that good in terms of overall NBA rank? Not particularly great, but considering how much focus is placed on Lowry on the Jazz in terms of, the roster and everything, I'm not surprised that he is in the 140 range. So I am. I'm surprised about Svi, Love, and Ace more so than anything. I can understand Collier. Collier's completely eliminated his perimeter shots this year, so you would expect his numbers to be higher, which they are.
He had a corner three tonight, knocked it down confidently, so it looked really good. But I'm surprised by Ace too. He was the guy that jumped out at me because he really struggled. He started the year struggling, let's face it. And for a rookie to do that well, that's very impressive. So I think that number is just going to continue to rise the rest of the year. But that's really good. It doesn't surprise me at all with Lowry because he's playing with guys that are not starters in the NBA. And let's face it, he gets all the attention. So if he were playing on a more balanced team, a better team, I think his numbers would shoot up. If he were sitting on Detroit, I think that his numbers would shoot up. He wouldn't be at 140. And then the guy that I think should be playing in the G League, and I think he's on this road trip, I don't get it, is Cody. Is that what we need with Cody is get him reps and get him confidence. And being bottom on the list, it doesn't surprise any of us. But I'm not sure what he's doing at the NBA level because it's not helping him right now. And we need to do everything we can to keep this guy, to show if we can develop this guy enough that he can be a guy that we can sign. If not, he's off our team and he's somewhere else. But I don't think it does him any good to be sitting on the bench and play sporadically and have these numbers. I'd rather him get 35 minutes a game playing in the G League. And I wish they would send him down.
Right now, my feeling was that Cody still has the talent to be one of the better defenders on the Jazz team in terms of, the measurables, I still believe that. But right now, he's not playing well enough offensively to even justify him being on the court defensively. Like, you just can't shoot with an effective field goal percentage of 33% and be the number 328 out of 328 of the players that fit this criteria of 10 games played in 10 minutes per game. Like, that's just, that's he's put him, it's a position where he can't be played. Like, you're right. You got to send him back to the G League. That's where he has to be until his numbers can improve. Now, he had some good games in the G League last year, some really good games. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Is the G League, that's the problem with the G League too, is like Cody needs to improve his offense, but the defense is even worse in the G League than it is in the NBA. And, he's in a tough spot. He really is.
He is. And right now, everyone's saying, and by his numbers, he is not a good draft pick. Everyone's saying that. By his numbers, absolutely say that. What the goal of the Jazz, in my opinion, should be is let's see if we can do everything we can to make him a good draft pick, to make him a player in the NBA that we want to sign a contract to. What you're doing is not working. Effective, he's in the teens in three-point percentage. That's why he's so low. He's worse than he is last year. Right? It's not working, whatever is happening. Let's send him Jack down the G League. Even if he's there the whole year, it doesn't matter, because what we're seeing here, he's not going to make it, right? He's not going to get the contract, so we have to try something different. And so I would rather send him down, let him stay down there the whole year, see if he can get some reps, see if he can get his confidence back, and then let's see if we can bring him back up later on the year. If not, at least he's getting reps to improve his game, because right now it's a struggle. So it doesn't surprise me, his numbers, but it surprises me that we're doing the same thing with him that's not working. Yeah.
Considering how little time there is for practice at the NBA level, this is another problem. I mean, bringing him on a road trip where you're not going to have any practice time, and then getting DNPs, like, you might as well just leave him back in Salt Lake and have him play at the G League. At least he can get into some practice time there, and also get some game reps in the actual games. So yeah, going on a road trip with the team. I mean, I didn't see him on the bench or anything, and I didn't look at the roster either. If he was, I didn't even take a look at the roster, but it just serves no purpose for him to be on the team right now. Okay, let's take a look at.
He was there. Is he? I just looked at the box score. A
DNP. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at offensive rating for the players. So this next thing, it's and the way that this offensive rating is calculated, it's individual offensive rating estimates the number of points produced, including assists, by a player per 100 offensive possessions. So here's the NBA ranking for each of the Jazz players and their rating. So the highest ranking player is number 56, Lowry, 127.5. Next is number 62, Kevin Love, at 126.6. Next is number 83, Svi, 123.9. Then Kyle at 153, which is 117.3. And then Keontae at 163, 116.7. Ace, 229, 111.3. Bryce, 236, 110.1. Collier, 241, 109.8. Walt, 243, 109.8. Taylor, 287, 103.8. Nurk, 297, 101.1. And then there's Cody, again, dead last, 328 at 74.5. So I'm not surprised to see Lowry at the top of this list at 56. That does not surprise me whatsoever. Quite frankly, I would expect Lowry to be the highest ranking offensive player on the team, because right now Lowry is clearly the best offensive player on the team. The one that does surprise me is Love at number 2. That still surprises me. It just shows, even though Love His athleticism is gone at this point. He still knows how to play. And that accounts for a lot. Just simply knowing how to play basketball, even though all the athleticism and all that are obviously behind him at this point, but he still knows how to play. So those are the two that stick out to me. The rest of them, Keontae, it's unfortunately that he's not higher than he is at 163. You wouldn't expect, considering how much better he's playing so far in this early year, and especially over the last 2 weeks, his field goal percentage numbers are continuing to climb. I would expect him to probably, by the end of the year, be in the 120 range or so. That's what I'm guessing, even though he's 163 right now. But I think that he will continue to climb throughout the season because he got off to a rough start shooting the ball, especially from three. And so I think that these numbers are going to continue to improve for him.
Yeah, the guy that I would want to focus on there, and you're going to get to defensive statistics next, is that Kyle doesn't get a lot of praise. I mean, he got a ton of praise during the offseason for his performance in the Summer League. But if you're thinking about who's getting all of the accolades so far this year, Ace is getting a lot, deservedly so. He's looking better and better. Lowry's getting a lot, and Keontae's getting a lot. Kyle's offensive rating is 117.3, and he hasn't shot the ball particularly well either, and he's 153rd on the list. Now, that's nothing to write home about, but on the Jazz, he's fourth on the Jazz in offensive rating, and you're going to get the defensive rating next. And if you're looking at players that both have a good offensive rating and a good defensive rating, that's what we should talk about, because you're going to see that Kyle's actually in both lists. So that's very impressive to me. And Keontae, I guess you may be right. This is all projections. But the thing I've noticed about Keontae through his career is that he has 10 good games and then 10 bad games. And to me, the key with Keontae is, can he consistently have an upward trend, or is he going to have the 10 bad games that pull down the stats again? Because that has been the characteristic of the last 2 years, is that the Keontae fans, like the Keontae promoters, he'll have this stretch and they're like, okay, Keontae's here, and then he'll do just as bad for 10 games in a row. And that's the part that I want to see, because if he's going on the trend that he has the last 12 games, I agree with you. It's going to be 120 at the end of the year. But if it's Keontae the last few years, it's going to have, you're going to go into these up and down parts of the season, and then he may end up just 115, 116 for the year. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. Of course, for the benefit of the Jazz, we hope that he's trending upward, and it's going to continue throughout the end of this, throughout the end of this year.
Yeah, I'm saying that his NBA rank will move from 163 up to about 120. And that'll probably correspond to the rating as well, right around 120. So I think that he'll probably move up. That's what I'm speculating. Now, these ratings don't tell the whole story too. Numbers can be deceiving at times too. Like I've always said, there's certain guys you don't want on your team, even though they've made the All-Star team and whatever. I always go back to John Wall, Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine. There's a number of guys that fit that mold that you don't want on your team under any circumstances. And those three guys fit that. And so numbers don't tell everything. No matter how good somebody's numbers look individually, are they helping the team win games, and can they play 35 minutes on a title contending team? That's what you're looking at. Bradley Beal could never do that. John Wall could never do that. And I contend that Zach LaVine can't do that. So you want guys who can play 35 minutes on a contending team as your core group. So numbers can be deceiving. But let's go now look at the defensive rating for these guys. And what you were saying about Kyle, I think, is a key, because if you just look at these last two games in Brooklyn and in New York, Kyle started in Brooklyn because Nurk was out. And Kyle had a great game. His numbers were fantastic in Brooklyn. And quite frankly, I think from a defensive effort standpoint, Kyle needs to play. From a ball movement standpoint on offense, Kyle needs to play. It's turning into Kyle needs to play on both sides of the ball for the Jazz to be functional. and he needs to play major minutes. And it seems like, quite frankly, we might be moving in that direction. Hardy might be moving in that direction into giving him more of a role on either side of the ball, because quite frankly, the Jazz are just a lot better team over the last week or two with Kyle on the floor. And it doesn't matter which side of the ball you're talking about.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I guess you're giving Hardy more credit than I am, because I think Kyle's been the overlooked player for 2 years now. You know, he's shown the ability last year too, but Hardy had given him like 5 games of DNPs in a row. I think he's got tremendous skills. Like I'm more bullish on him than you are, I think, because I do think he can be a 35-minute a guy. I think he's got that much skill, and we're going to look at it in the defensive statistics. I mean, he's not bad, and he's improving. And is he stellar? No, I'm never going to give you that. He does not move his feet well, but he is trying, and he really brings it on both sides of the ball. And for the Jazz team, how bad they are defensively, he's a standout. So I don't want to steal your thunder. Why don't you go through these stats?
So here's the defensive rating, and this is individual defensive rating estimates the number of points allowed, including blocks and steals, by a player per 100 defensive possessions. So that's what this means. So the top-ranking player on the Jazz is Nurk at 104. Kyle is next at NBA rank 115, 108.5. Next is Kevin Love, 146 at 109.5. Next is Bryce at 211, 112.1. Walt at 230, 112.9. Ace at 242, 113.6. Cody, 245, 113.7. Collier, 282, 115.6. Keontae, 303, 117.6. Lowry, 319, 119.8. Taylor, 320, 119.8, and Svi at 322, 121. As you can see here, the starters for the Jazz are all really bad. And that's why, and you would expect that. They're the guys that are getting heavy minutes. They're allowing a ton of points because the Jazz defense has just not been good. So all the starters are getting hit hard for being starters and playing a lot of minutes, except for Nurk. Nurk is the one guy that kind of differs from that. All the rest of those guys are just getting crushed because they're playing a lot of minutes, and the Jazz are just awful as a team defensively. The one thing I'm looking at this, though, is Lowry is not that poor of a defensive player. And so he's getting really dragged down by some of the players around him, in my opinion. I mean, Keontae is still not a plus defensive player. He's not a mediocre defensive player. In my opinion, Keontae is still a negative defensive player. And this is one of the huge problems with if you project Keontae to be a 35-minute player at this point for a title contending team. It's difficult to say that he has that ability until he continues to improve. He has improved. There's no doubt that he's improved over past seasons. He still has a ways to go, and we hope, at least that's all we can do at this point, is hope that he continues to work on it and continues to, embrace improvement on that side of the basketball.
Who in this list, besides the ones you pointed out, were surprising to you?
Oh, well, quite frankly, I would say those top 6 are surprising to me. I mean, Ace is 242, so that's not good out of 328. But Walt at even 230 for both Ace and Walt to be, even that good on such a poor defensive team, I'm kind of surprised about. And Love, still, the guy can barely move anymore, and he's 146. And then you have Kyle at 115, and Kyle, that's what he said this summer, that he's got to prove that he's not a negative defensive player, and here he is, the second best numbers on the team to this point, 20 games into the season. So that's remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
Let me talk about Ace, because 10 games in, I told you I looked at these defensive stats, and let me just say this. These defensive stats are calculated differently depending on the website.
Yeah.
So there are some slight differences between them. So, but Ace was one of the worst in the NBA at a negative 137 or at 137. So not only has Ace improved his offense, he's improved his defense dramatically. And if you look at the trend, like if you were to look at the last 10 games, Ace wouldn't be 242 on the list. He'd be much higher because he had to go from 137 in the stat I was looking at to what he is now. So he has really turned it around, being a rookie. So he's going in the right direction there. But I agree with you. Like, because Lowry is playing with so many negative defensive players, it really hurts him. The one argument against that is Svi is also playing with those same players, and somehow he is the best defensive player in the group when all of our other starters are the bottom four. So I can't really explain. And honestly, at 104, Nurk at 104 is about where the Oklahoma City Thunder are as a team, which are the best in the league. I think they're like 103. So it's impressive what the man has done. And I can't really explain, like, okay, the four other guys are negatively affecting each other, but then, Nurk strands out. And, Taylor is obviously surprised too, because Taylor, our expectation was Taylor was going to be the defensive player. And we're all giving him a pass, which we should, because he's still trying to get himself back in after that horrific injury. And honestly, we both think it's going to take him the whole year. A lot of people do. And I think that we have to give him a pass. But if these numbers reflect who Taylor is, that's a real problem, because we did draft him for his defensive abilities, and he's not showing this year great defensive numbers.
Yeah, I'm still willing to. Considering where Taylor is, I think that this year, I don't think he should be judged harshly. And you agree with that. So, I'm not going to even criticize. I think Taylor needs to spend a lot of time in the G League as well this year, just to try and get his feet back under him. And I would like to see him in the G League. He and Cody, I think, should probably both be there. It's certainly better than getting DNPs on a road trip or something like that. I think they should play in the G League and try and get more confidence. And I mean, Taylor took like a year off of playing basketball, and he wasn't allowed to play basketball. So it's working back. But the Jazz as a whole need to improve on the defensive end. I mean, we got to have guys. We need multiple guys in the top 100 on defense, and quite frankly, we need 2 or 3 guys in the top 50 to be really good defensively, and we aren't there yet. And Nurk, I don't have Nurk's how many minutes a game he's averaging this year so far, but if he were playing 35 minutes a game, he probably wouldn't even be in the top 45. I'm guessing those numbers would decline further from that. But the one thing Nurk does well is he steals the ball. He's always reaching for it and all that, which really helps him, and it helps his number in this category, even though he's not really a rim protector at all, because he has no lift, quite frankly. He's big and bulky, and he can take up space and get rebounds and stuff like that, but he doesn't have the rim protection skills that Walker has, obviously, as Walker is one of the best in the league. And the team as a whole is certainly missing Walker at this point defensively. It's clear as day.
Yeah. Also, just one final thought on this is that this was 328 players. So 328 players that met your criteria. We have four that are in the last 28. 4.
Yeah.
That is not good. And I think that our coaching staff needs to look at this. It was something that Hardy said, we're going to focus on defense. And you got this year to prove this, Hardy, but this is a real warning sign, and something does have to be done. It's personnel, it's schemes, it's effort, it's coaching, it's motivation. It could be a lot of different things, but this does have to improve. Like we're a young team. We're not going to be great in this, but we could be better, and we have to be better.
Yeah, at some point, this has to change. The Jazz can't just be focusing on their offense. Even though we have these teams that have been built over the last 15 years or so that are quote unquote people believe that they're the best offensive teams we've ever had. Like Golden State was great because of defense. OKC is great because of defense. These teams, Boston a couple of seasons ago was great because of defense. I mean, quite frankly, if you don't defend, you're not winning anything. And so this has to change. It has to improve. It must improve. The Jazz are going nowhere unless these numbers drastically improve. And so far, over the past 3+ seasons, we have not seen great improvement. So this is one of the things we all need to look at and continue to monitor, because if the Jazz want to contend for something, at some point, they have to improve on the defensive end.
And looking at these numbers then, just focusing and finishing up on these defensive rankings, if we're to look at these and we're going to say, okay, we're trying to build a championship level team, notwithstanding like all the accolades that the team has received this year, or a few players have received this year, and I think really 3 players, Ace, Keontae, and Lowry. If you look at these numbers, on the defensive side, you're saying, show me 5 starting players for a championship level team. Honestly, from these numbers, who could, if these are the numbers that reflect actually who they are, which of these players could be on the defensive side a starting player on a championship level team? Svi, Taylor, Lowry, Keontae, Collier, Cody, no. Ace is too young, so maybe he's in middle of the pack, right? So maybe Ace, but he would have to improve from that. But, Nurk is, let's say, to the end of his career. Love is past the end of his career, right? So it's like you can have one bad defensive player on your team for a championship level, maybe even 2, because they're so skilled offensively or they do other things. But what you're really trying to do in the NBA right now is you're trying to get players that can play both ways, right? And can add something on both ends. That's the new NBA. And it's very hard to find championship level players that only play one side of the ball. And this, to me, reflects that we have a lot of players right now that are just playing one side of the ball. Yeah,
I completely agree. The thing is, it's just hard to, I'll continue to say that I continue to believe that Lowry can play 30 minutes a game on a title contending team. And I think he's the only guy on the roster right now who has that ability. But on a title contending team, Lowry is not averaging 29 points a game. He's probably at 18 or so, quite frankly. That's how I think he's probably in the number 3 spot, scoring on a title contending team. But he is, I think his numbers being, destroyed by the teammates he's playing with and the coach he's playing for. So I think that Lowry's being hurt in that area. But I continue to believe that Walker could play a role. But I don't think Walker is a 30-minute-a-game guy on a title-contending team right now. I don't think he's good enough offensively to do that. But I think that he could play 15 minutes or so on a title-contending team. And right now, I think those are the only 2 guys on the roster. I don't think anybody else is ready. I mean, we hope that Ace gets there. I still hope that Walt gets there. A lot of people are still holding out hope that Keontae gets there. And people are talking that Keontae right now is a borderline all-star level player. I mean, I think that's I think that's too optimistic. He needs to improve a lot defensively. Yeah, as we've said, John Wall, all-star, Zach LaVine, all-star, all these guys. All-star is, I'm looking for guys who can really play and not just get to the all-star game. I want guys who can play a major role on a team that is elite. And that's where I think that Lowry fits in a 30-minute-a-game guy that can do that under the right coaching and the right role. But I think that he's the one guy right now.
Now, one of the next statistics we should look at, we're not going to look at it today, we don't have it prepared today, but is to actually compare some of our players, not only against their last few seasons, so we can see how they progressed. And some of them have progressed. Like Keontae has certainly progressed from what he was. But you brought up some other players to say, like, look, this is what they're, they made the All-Star team. Compare their stats and when they made the All-Star team against some of the people you're saying are All-Stars this year. It's night and day different. It's very curious that everybody wanted, not everybody, but a lot of people wanted to push Colin Sexton out of Utah. Like, okay, let's get other guys. If you look at his second and third year in the league, his efficiency is like fantastic, scoring like 25 points a game. His numbers are much better. Not on the assist side. The assist side, he's always been bad at. And defensively, he's always been bad. One of the worst defensive players in the league, but our guys are too. But if you compare what their shooting percentages are, et cetera, which we will do so, we'll see that there's still, like, we should be optimistic about our players and where they're going and where we want them to go. That's what we want to do as fans of the team. But I also think we need to be realistic of kind of where they are relative to some of these other people that have made the All-Star team.
Well, I think we're going to about call it a night because we've already been on for 45 minutes. But on my final note, this doesn't relate to the Jazz, but another one of these guys who's made the All-Star team that shouldn't be considered a title player at 35 minutes a game, Charlotte has to cut LaMelo Ball loose. It's time to move on. Charlotte, I want you to win. I really like Concanipple. Move on from LaMelo Ball, please. That's my final thought.
Well, my final thought is great, but please not to the Jazz.
Yeah.
Like age? No.
No, don't go
not
into the
Trae
talent.
Young.
No. Don't go into the talent acquisition mode and say, well, we just need to acquire talent, like one of these other podcasters continues to insist. No. Please, no. Not that. But anyway, anything else? All right. Well, we are going to call it a night tonight, and we wish that everybody please like, share, and subscribe for those watching on YouTube. And you can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack. And we are going to call it a night, and I hope that everybody has a great night and great weekend, and we will talk to you in a few days. Talk to you later.